we're just designed for that. We evolved to do that. So a music festival, weird for us. It's exactly what we want to do. In fact, we get so much value from being in community. That's how we thrive.
Hey, neighbors. Welcome to the Music Festivals podcast. This is the show that helps you get to know music festivals, festival venues, and campgrounds before you go. I'm your host, Neighbor Nate, and I'm glad you're in the neighborhood.
All right. I would like to welcome to the show Paul J. Zach. Paul, thanks very much for doing this.
Of course. Yeah, it was going to be fun.
Yeah, no, a little bit about your background, and I'll just read this from my friend Chat GPT. But you're a neuroscientist and a professor at Claremont Graduate University, and you've done a lot of research on trust and human connection, uh, and this chemical called oxytocin and how that influences our behavior. And your book that you wrote on this years ago was The Moral Molecule. There's been many books since. But tell me a little bit about how you stumbled across this interesting brain chemical and hormone that we all have.
Yeah, so our lab was the first to show that oxytocin in the brain had profound behavioral effects on human beings. So we developed a protocol to measure the brain's acute release of oxytocin and did I believe, the first oxytocin um, pharmacologic intervention. So we can shoot synthetic oxytocin into the brain through the nose. And so what we found is essentially that almost any positive social interaction that you have with another human, or for that matter, a dog or a cat, induces the brain to release this neurochemical, oxytocin, and that promotes positive social behaviors. We call these pro-social behaviors, helping behaviors, generosity, caring. It does that by increasing our sense of empathy, so that empathy is a shared emotional state. So um, in a true neuroanatomical sense, we are social creatures in that we have many more receptors for oxytocin and related neurochemicals than any other mammal. So we're acutely sensitive unconsciously to other people's emotional states. So that's what makes us great social creatures. Not only can I cognitively figure out, oh, this is why Nate is doing this thing. We call that theory of mind. If I were Nate, I would understand I'm doing this. But now I understand why this is important to you. That's that empathy response, right? So having that double ability to forecast what you're doing and why you care about it is why, in my view, we have sent men to the moon, but chimpanzees have not.
So, yeah, it's interesting you talk about how we're attuned to be able to notice emotion and other people and things like that. Um, Talk a little bit about how that plays out in just human life in general. You're walking around on the street, you're in the city, you're in the country, and yet a lot of us put the blinders on, right? Like we become conditioned to go to the grocery store and not really, keep the eyes down, things like that. What's going on there? Uh,
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a funny trade-off in that sometimes if we make eye contact or we smile or we say hello, we may be seen as vulnerable. On the other hand, it also signals to people around us that we're safe to engage with. So I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", 200 pounds. So when I'm out hiking on the weekends, I say hi to everyone I pass because I want them to know that I'm not going to murder them, right? So I smile, say, hi, good morning, how are you? And so I'm signaling that. Now, if you're smaller, if you're female, if you're more at risk, you may not want to do that because you're creating an opening for someone who could predate on you. And so that's the thing that our brain evolved to do as social creatures, which is have this balance between the fear of engaging with another person, particularly a stranger, and the value of interacting with that person. And that value could be we become friends, we work on a project together, we become romantic partners. Lots of value to being together. So just to put a cap on that, for things like music festivals or working in an office, it's totally natural for human beings to conglomerate together with strangers in the sense of not people that you're genetically closely related to, and do something jointly together. That we're just designed for that. We evolved to do that. So a music festival working, it's not weird for us. It's exactly what we want to do. In fact, we get so much value from being in community. That's how we thrive.
Yeah, this is that strangers stopping strangers just to shake their hand lyric from Grateful Dead, and you see it happen. What is it about then? Is it contextual? Is it the environment? So a lot of people come and what you described, walking down and just saying hi to people and everybody. Even to the fact I've been at festivals where been setting up a tent and random strangers come up and, hey, can we give you a hand with that? Here, you got to lift this generator off the truck, let me give you a hand, what is it, what do you think it is about the context of the environment? Do people enter in with just more willingness, or is there something else happening once they get there in their brain?
No, yes, and so first of all, you have self-selection. So we've all decided to go to this festival together. So we share that in common. We're interested in this music, and I think one reason that communal music is more powerful than listening to streaming song is that what we've shown in published research is that this emotional state that uses oxytocin and another neurochemical dopamine that connects us to others and motivates that behavior is contagious. So I actually enjoy the experience more if I'm in community, if I'm having it particularly live, right? That's really wild. So I have a selection bias for sure. I have people who are looking for an emotional response. Those emotional response allow us to open up emotionally, right? We almost want to be overwhelmed. We want to have that emotion. This is like crying at a movie or even crying at music festivals, and we've actually done research on this. And I'll hold off on that. On
Yeah,
rituals, these essentially are rituals, right?
yeah,
Um, so anyway, so you have a self-selection, you have this kind of a safe space, right? You have to get a ticket to get in. So you're not just a rando person. You're a person who have paid, who've decided to be here, and so we share something together. And then we're having this power, if the music has already started, this powerful emotional experience, or we're anticipating that emotional experience. And we all want to have that catharsis, that um, exegesis of emotion coming out of us. It's really valuable for humans. So if we look at individuals who suffer from things like depression and anxiety, they're bottled up. Those emotions don't come out, right? If we express them, if we connect to them, particularly around other people, it's in a very real sense, neuroanatomically, it's a healing approach.
interesting. So it's interesting. You might find this interesting, actually. So All Good Presents has been around for, I don't know, 30 years now, doing festivals. They ran the All Good Festival for years, and they do three: All Good Now, 4848, and Dark Star Jubilee. They actually have a staff of volunteers that my friend Taffy leads that is called the Vibe Patrol. And so the job of the Vibe Patrol is simply to vibe, right? Simply to go around and interact with people and smile and hula hoop and dance and get the crowd loose and fired up, right? Just by being friendly. And I can guarantee that they probably never heard oxytocin before, but it's interesting that just intentionally it seems like they've almost designed something to start that flowing, if you will. It's fascinating to kind of think about that we're creatures that watch each other and then pick up on that as well.
And there are oxytocin super responders, right? So a lot of those volunteers may be people who really want that response. Again, oxytocin is a reactive neurochemical. It's difficult to make your brain make it yourself. You could watch a movie, I guess, and do that. But
Yeah.
so I want to kind of give this gift to others. And we have published research showing the sort of personality traits of people who want to give that gift. So they tend to be extroverted, agreeable, empathic, right? They're connectors, they're people,
Yeah.
and they tend to have a lot more friends. They tend to be happier in their lives, and so that embeddedness in community is really vital. And we certainly saw this during the COVID lockdowns, right? Where
Mhm.
people really got depressed. It was hard to connect to others. Um, and we've actually done research at music festivals. I think this wasn't in the 2012 book you talked about, but um, we had a big research program on rituals of all types, religious rituals, music rituals, soldiers marching, which is a ritual, and we actually
Yeah.
measured oxytocin-related neurochemicals. So we had this music festival in California called Lightning in a Bottle, and we had a tent. We had this set up. It's like third day of the festival, so people are kind of exhausted, and we want to actually measure. In this case, while people had a joint meditation experience, which was part of the festival. Like, why is that? Because this meditation guru that kind of got sucked me into this said, like, people start crying, like it's just a guided meditation for 15 minutes. So
Yeah.
anyway, we set up this tent with generators and took blood before and after, and it was crazy. One of our phlebotomists didn't come in, so I was going to process all the blood. So we have a little trailer, and And they call me up, "We're missing a phlebotomist. The thing starts in 1 minute." So I'm running over there. I'm drawing blood. I don't even have gloves on, but I'm like, "Give me some gloves. Give me some needles." It's like one
Yeah.
of these crazy TV shows.
Yeah.
And sure enough, afterwards, we're doing the second blood draw to measure oxytocin, and people were hugging me. People were crying. It was this really cathartic experience. And so I think part of that, of course, we didn't assess where people, had taken some drugs, for example. Some of that might have been drug induced, but some of it was just that community that we had this joint experience that was so powerful. It allowed us to really connect again in a real physiologic sense. What I'm talking about is not in theory or ethereal. It's actually measurable. And I think that's what's important. And that's what brings us into these ritualistic events. And is that fair to say that you think a music festival is a ritual?
Oh, absolutely, and it's interesting you bring that up too because there's the organic rituals. We were just at a festival called Whippersnap where there's two of the after parties. There's the home team and the drinking team, and they always set up this elaborate campsite. But and it's organic. It's not part of the festival, but it
Right.
is because they do it. They literally brought a truck out and unloaded like leather couches into the woods, and then
Wow.
put a big like parachute up, but that became the after party every night, and it was people sitting around just connecting right
Mhm.
after the music and playing their own music, and that's an interesting transition too, is that the bonding that happens not just from the performers out on the stage giving it to the audience getting excited giving it back to the performers, but then that also happens in the music afterwards too, where there's another type of social bonding. If you've ever watched musicians up close, you can almost see it, right? The eye connections and the quick smiles that come up when everybody hits a high point, right? I have to
Right.
think that some of those reactions are involuntary, right? They're just in the moment, and all kinds of chemicals are going nuts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've spoken in, very, very big events, and I've spoken now enough for a couple decades where I have learned how to absorb that energy from the audience. And when you are having a great time, this is high. Like you hear with musicians, that you can't go to sleep after a concert because you've just, left everything
Yeah,
on the stage and you have this just amazing energy that you pulled from the audience. But we also do see that in the audience, again, in research that we have done, that audience members you're touching people, you're hugging those are strangers. You're dancing
mhm,
together, like, it's a really interesting event, and so, if listeners wanna just try this on a micro scale, something I tried many years ago and I really enjoy is just say hi to people in elevators. Like,
yeah,
why is we have this ritual where we pretend like there's no one else in this weird box with us? So I started doing this just to see what would happen. 'Cause I'm a Martian. I'm trying to figure out what the humans are doing, and so I
yeah,
like to run little mini experiments. And about half the people, you have this wonderful little 20 or 30-second conversation, like you're in a hotel. Like I'm traveling in a couple days, so I'll be in a
yeah.
hotel. I'll be at a conference center. Hey, where are you coming in from? And about the other half the people kind of freak out a little bit, which is also kind of interesting to me. Like, dude, you're in a hotel with luggage. Like, I'm in a hotel with luggage. What right?
We have a similar
So
thing
again,
going on.
it's that balance between the sort of fear and, connection, and so we're constantly doing that. Some people do it better than others, and I think also as you get a little older, it's a little more normal just to say hi to people and, my when my children were young, my children are young adults now, but when they were young, if I say hi to the waitress and chat with her or whatever at the diner, they would just be apoplectic, like, "Why are you talking to her?" I'm like, "It's another human. She's gonna bring us food. She's a nice lady. She's been on her feet all day. Be nice to her," right? So
Yeah, it's almost like, yeah, well, these basic rules, even before the science was there, we knew all of them. We just tend to forget things because we're fickle humans, and we do the same things over and over. Um, you talk about generosity a lot in the book, and I thought that was interesting. And you did some experiments on that. I'm going to grab a show and tell thing. So this is a rock, and it says Blues Bash on it, and it was painted by my friend Val. She's also a resident here at the Florida Sand Music Ranch. And she does these for every festivals and gives them to people, but then also goes and randomly hides them around the camp. And some of your experiments revolved around whether or not people, like if they were giving a gift to a random stranger versus somebody that they knew. Talk about how oxytocin and gifting kind of go together, and what do we experience in our brain when we're actually giving somebody a gift, whether they know it or not, whether it's direct or just leaving it for somebody to find.
yeah, I think both those are very interesting behavior. So she sounds like a really fascinating person. Yeah, so what we found is that, someone has to initiate this process of connection, right? So, again, there are certain personality types that tend to want to do that. your friend Val may be one of those who are better at initiating. Most of us are responsive. If someone's nice to us, we'll kind of be nice to them. So giving that gift is the initiator. What's interesting about oxytocin is that it stays active in the brain for about 20 to 30 minutes. So you're actually creating this little time bubble in which now your physiologic stress is reduced, your empathy is increased, you're more likely to connect to the next person. So there's a very real sense in which getting this little gift uh, allows a kind of virtuous cycle in which you gave me a little kindness, I'm kinder to the next person, I feel more comfortable. Again, I'm changing that balance between fear and connection. The hidden rocks are actually very interesting. So the brain is set up to find surprises. So surprises mean I've learned something new from a brain perspective. And so that little like, oh my gosh, there's a painted rock, right? So all of a sudden it's a sort of double whammy in the brain. It's a surprise, which the brain loves. Something new happens, so I'm learning something. So that's why the brain is essentially rewards us using this dopamine to find surprising things in the environment. But then I realized, oh, a human put this here. So now I have this uh, oxytocin response at a distance, and we've shown this in many experiments that I don't have to directly engage with you in a nice way. I can do that at a distance via computer. I can send you a message by text. I can actually do all those things, and if I may, we've actually created free technology that allows people to actually
Yeah.
see the connections they're having in real time by measuring
This
the
this
effect of
works for
dopamine and
your
oxytocin.
Fitbit and stuff.
Yeah,
Your
yeah, exactly
yeah,
right. Called the
yeah,
Six
that's
app.
neat.
And so we've shown that people need six of these well-defined high neurologic immersion moments. So this is the impact of dopamine and oxytocin. When you have six or more of these, you're connected. And so we find in these group experiences like music festivals, people are getting 15, 20, right? They're expanding their brain to be better social creatures by adapting to this new environment. So I think any of these communal events are important. Music festivals essentially more important because they have this induced emotional response. Music is there to induce emotional response. So if I can give you one example, so we've done a bunch of experiments at religious rituals, which almost always include music, right? We have this communal singing. I was on the road actually on a book tour with Moral Molecule years ago, and at Harvard University there is a um, atheist ministry for the university. So basically, people who don't believe in God but still want to have some community setting to connect to others, to be of service to others. And they said, "Would you come give a talk to the atheist group at Harvard?" Sure, I'm on book tour. I'm in Boston anyway. And so I go there, and nicely they had, I just bought some copies of the book and read it. And they said, what are we not doing? And I said, what you're not doing is singing. And they
Hmm.
said, great. So we just spontaneously said, well, let's all sing a song that we know together. And so we sang the Beatles, All You Need Is Love, a song most people know, right? So, and so I think, again, all these rituals, if they include something like music and a communal experience, heighten this sense of connection. And we look
Yeah.
more generally at what people need to thrive: diet, exercise, and sleep. We know all that. But the fourth part, about 50% of our happiness, is due to the quality of our social experiences. So if I'm emotionally open, if I'm at a music festival, if I'm at a church, and I connect to others in an emotional way, again, I'm training myself to be a better connector outside of those experiences. I'm adapting to this new environment. And who do we want to be around? Someone who's like closed and doesn't want to look at us, or someone who's like emotionally open, interesting, shares their life with us. Those people attract others to us, and so we build these stronger social relationships.
That's interesting. So we do a lot of live streaming at these things, and it's interesting when you talk about the social relationship part of it there too. Is that we'll oftentimes get people who realize that we're on the stream, and they'll be saying hi at home on the cameras to people that are watching the stream at home, but then you'll see the comments in social media. We track the comments on YouTube and Facebook, and usually by about day three, the comments are moving faster. And I wonder, I'm just more curious of even like the online offline connection there, people who are at the event versus people who are watching from afar, but feel like they're part of the experience because their friends are there. They still have the context. They wanted to see that band. It'd be interesting to study like how long does the bubble, we call it the music festival bubble, where you've had that much time, how long does that last when you go home before you need your next, up of a music festival or some type of community event to be around nice people again? Um, have you ever thought about doing any like longer term studies on like the lasting impact? of
Yeah,
those type of
we
events.
yeah, because of this technology that allows us to measure the value of the experiences you're having, and again, most of those high value experiences are social. About 80% of these peak experiences are social. Um, we could actually do that. So, for example, we recently rolled this out at a major tech company. I'm sure I'm NDA, so I can't mention, but
Yeah.
someplace that you're using every day, say ordering stuff. And what we found is that the more people use the app, the more they were thriving, the more their average neurologic immersion, that is, they had more of these key moments a day, but also their satisfaction with life outside of work was better. They had more energy at work. And so this sense of connection is really building up our capacity to be better human beings at some level, right? To be, again, emotionally open, present, energized. And so
Yeah.
when we think about thriving, the sort of core components of that. So again, happiness is a kind of acute state. Thriving is this kind of long-term state. The core components are having consistently positive mood and having high energy. Well, that sounds like something I want to dig into.
Yeah.
And so, again, people who get six or more of these high value moments, and most of which are social, sustain their positive mood and high energy. And so, if we have an experience like a music festival or any other ritual that allows us to connect in a truly emotional way, to open ourselves emotionally, we're training ourselves to have more of these key moments. We're allowing ourselves to thrive. And we find that people who get six or more of these key moments also live on average about 3 years longer
Oh, there
than
you go.
people who don't. So look at that. And those are generally 3 healthy years. So even this is the kind of sort of philosophical dilemma. Even if you're the most selfish person in the world and you just want to live a longer life, you've got to invest in relationships. You got to invest in being emotionally open with other people. So there's no room for selfish people. So that's the punchline.
You've done a lot of great work since the Moral Molecule. You mentioned the technology company that you have. You also mentioned Immersion. Was that the most recent book, or
Second
talk a little
most
bit
recent book.
second
Yeah.
most recent?
So I wrote a book in 2022 called Immersion, The Science of the Extraordinary and the Source of Happiness. So that a lot of work on there and studies we've done, again, at festivals, during rituals, how to make education and training better. Like you've all been in, like, I'm still an educator. I'm a professor. And I don't know, half or more of the classes I've ever had, the hundreds of classes I've had in my life were terrible. They're awful. And so, how do we actually create those experiences that are really valuable? And valuable experiences are actually remembered. So, not only do I remember that music festival because of the high emotionality and those connections that I made, the same thing applies to humans. And my current book, which came out just late last year, is called The Little Book of Happiness: A
Okay.
Scientific Approach to Living Better. It actually has a QR code for our free app, Six, that people can use to measure their happiness. The app links to your calendar and your location. So every day you'll see, oh, where are the most valuable things that I'm doing? So we have had people use this at music festivals.
Yeah.
It's a private app, so I don't see their data, but I know that we've had people use it at festivals. And at least anecdotally, they say, I'm getting just tons of sense of connection. So I think for listeners, we need connection to really thrive as human beings, to have a quote excuse to connect in an emotional way to others is really important to us. We need to be embedded in community and work, and I don't know, wherever people go, the movies, the gym. That's nice. That's all good, right? You're around other people. But music, I think, brings us together in a way that most other experiences don't because of this heightened emotionality.
One of our tenets here is we think that the examples that are set at music festivals can actually change the world. We live in this world that's full of fear. You've said the word fear multiple times in this interview, right? And everybody's scared shitless right now. Um, and so it's nice to know that you've now looked at the science to back up what you can see, but now there's actual science behind it that says, yeah, this is a good thing. And promoters everywhere are also very excited that you've mentioned that if you go to more music festivals, you'll live longer. Uh, that's a good thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, our brains are very adaptive. So if we're in this safe, connected, if I can say it, loving environment with other
mhm.
people, then we actually have this real sense of improved immune system. Again, less cardiovascular stress, right? All these are established in the literature. So we need to, again, I'm using quotes, excuse. We need to volitionally find those activities that are valuable to you that are done in community, and I think, an alternative might be comedy shows, right? Those, again, have high levels of emotionality, and so we're all laughing, maybe people are drinking. Even moderate drinking is okay, right? Moderate drinking kind of reduces some of those stress responses, and so and, maybe moderate, drug use, as long as you're not addicted or you're not hurting other people, do what you ever do wanna do. But I think there's a real reason that we wanna have these experiences. I mean, Burning Man's a great example of that, right? Where
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
this gift economy, and so again, you're self-selecting, to go to Burning Man. So, it may not be for everybody, or the TED conferences, which I go to generally.
yeah,
It's an amazing thing to be able to walk up at the TED conference because it's people are can choosing to get there. It's expensive, and to talk to a billionaire and just go, hey, I was curious about this thing you did 10 years ago, or like in real life, you don't really get to do that. So we have to choose these ritualized events so that we're open up and we can just connect to other people.
yeah. And we've known that as human beings for thousands and thousands of years. There was all kinds of big gatherings. This is really fascinating work, and I'm so grateful that you're doing it and you're willing to jump on the festival podcast about this, because I really think there's a lot of application here. And I, for one, I'm going to go ahead and download that app too. I'll make sure to put links in the show notes. Anything else that people can do to figure out their own happiness? What else, in or outside of festivals?
I think it's really the my current book on that little book of happiness. It literally is a little book. It's just a bunch of exercises you can do.
Yeah,
Just practicing kindness to others, practicing connection, practicing caring. You mentioned this kind of festival bubble. It's a great question, but again, if you want to be, a human who lives longer, happier, and healthier, start investing in relationships. That's what the book is about, and it could be again saying hi to someone in an elevator, being kind to the waitress at the diner. I'm really making a note to get to know people around you and treat them with kindness. For listeners who feel kind of isolated or separated from others, we've shown in published research that pets are actually a good way to train your brain to be better connectors. Dogs in
oh,
particular are really good. Think about when I moved recently, and I had a dog, and the dog's now died, but dog when I
I'm
moved, I met all my neighbors. Within 2 weeks, I knew everybody because anyone with a dog is someone you want
yeah,
to chat with. If the dog's healthy, you must be a safe person. And so you kind of think about those levers you can use to really forge those connections with others and then invest in those relationships. So that just to finish the thought, the literature shows that if you have basically two, what I call 3 a.m. friends, if you have two people outside your family, you call it 3 a.m. during a crisis and they'll show up, you're kind of good for life. So how do you get those? You've got to invest in relationships. What's the best way to do that? Time, of course, but having experiences and slightly uncomfortable experiences, right? Music festivals are not always comfortable, right? You got to find
yeah,
the bathroom. You're there all day. You're in the sun. So that travel is a great way to do that. Hiking, getting tired together. Those stressful situations actually bond us together. And so
yeah.
be a little uncomfortable and find people that want to be uncomfortable with you. You'll strengthen those relationships quite quickly.
This is all amazing. I really appreciate you joining the show, and keep up the good work. It's really
Oh,
fascinating, and hopefully you get to more music festivals.
I I
And
have to now.
sure,
Now you
yeah,
we figured all this out. So yeah, thank you for
yeah,
having me on. Great to see you.
yeah. Thanks so much.